What's up, everybody? Welcome to Pericresis, the Daily Dance, and we are right in the middle of this Christmas series called The Mess, A Christmas Story. And so right now, it's Monday. It's a week before Christmas. Some of you right now are cranking out some finals or some tests right before going on Christmas break. Some of you have just started Christmas break, and that is awesome. But with Christmas almost here, it's important for us to think about and digest, what is Christmas? What does it mean? Especially as we have taken some time these last several weeks to talk about the mess, the mess of our lives and the mess that God enters into. The last thing we just talked about was when the angel shows up and speaks to the shepherds. He said, the Messiah, the King, when he is born, this is good news of great, free, dancing joy. And ultimately, Christianity, a walk with Jesus, the reality of the Messiah showing up in our lives, if it doesn't bring us joy and complete freedom and happiness, then we're doing it wrong. And that is what we will be talking about this week and next, the week after Christmas. So here we go. This is it. Think about it. In the history of birth, and that's kind of awkward, I know. We probably shouldn't think about it too much. But in the history of birth, there has only been one individual who could choose their family. I'm sure you love your family, even if you don't love your family. But none of us really have the ability to choose our family. None of us, really. There was an individual who could hand-pick their family, could hand-pick the family they would be born into, the family that they would identify with and choose to identify with. And so it is important for us as we think about the mess in the Christmas story and Jesus showing up in the mess of our lives, it's important for us to take a look. What family did God choose to identify with? What family did God choose to be a part of? Now, many of you know this, and if you don't, in Matthew chapter 1, it is a genealogy. It is the family tree of Jesus. From Adam till Jesus, we can take a look at the entire family that God chose to own as his. And it's actually really interesting and fascinating to take a look and unpack these people, their narrative, their life, their story, how they chose to move and to go about their existence on this planet. Now, of course, at that time in the first century, genealogies were labeled by the dude, right? It was all about the dads. It was a very male-dominant society. And what is a beautiful and fascinating and interesting and actually risky thing is Matthew, in his account of Jesus' family history, the family tree, he includes women. Now for us in 2017 here in the United States of America, of course we would include women, right? Because we understand women are equal to men, and that really isn't a really big, wait, what? Women are equal to men? Of course, we get that. But at that time, in that culture, this would have just blown their minds, that this idea that women are included in the family tree of Jesus, in the genealogy of Jesus, it's kind of teaching, kind of totally rocking and moving their culture that yes, women are equal to men. So just that is interesting. But furthermore, the women who are mentioned, there are only 4. The first woman mentioned is Tamar. Some of you, just when I say Tamar, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are many of you, I'm sure, who are like, Tamar? Is that a Star Wars character? What is that, right? So, once upon a time in a faraway land, there lived a man. His name was Abraham. Father Abraham, he had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. Abraham had a son named Isaac. Isaac lived his life, did his thing. He had a son named Jacob. Jacob then goes and has 12 sons. And what's interesting is Jacob, he really had 2 wives, and these wives were sisters, Rachel and Leah. Rachel's the one that he loved and wanted to live happily ever after with her. The struggle was he was also married to Leah, kind of tricked into it. It's a weird story. We'll have to talk about it later. Look it up. It's in Genesis. But Jacob ends up marrying Leah and having all these children with her. And what's interesting when we read the story is Leah keeps thinking, whenever she gets pregnant, she's like, maybe my husband will love me. Maybe my husband will love me. It's actually a really sad story about a woman who is desperately wanting to be loved and accepted by her husband and just isn't, and thinks that by having all of these kids, then maybe her husband will love her. Anyway, Leah ends up having all these kids. One of these sons that Jacob and Leah have, his name is Judah. And so think about it. Judah, his entire life, he grows up with this understanding he loves his mama, but he wishes that his mama could feel loved. Like Judah's whole life, he knows that dad, Jacob, doesn't really love his mom, Leah. So Judah grows up. Judah gets married. He has a son, and he decides to name his first son One day in the kingdom, I'm pretty sure we're going to start talking to these people, and one day we'll meet Judah. One of the questions I want to ask Judah is like, really, dude? Like, that's the name you came up with for your son? Like, come on now. So, Judah has this boy named grows up, and he gets married to this girl named Tamar. Here's the thing, the Bible doesn't really have a lot to say about the son, but there is this one line that does talk about him, and like, I'm telling you, like if there was ever a piece of scripture that talks about you, this would be like the worst one. Essentially it says, was so evil, like he was so terrible that God had to kill him. So just me saying that like he was so evil that God had to kill him, some of you are gonna have some questions and you're gonna be like, wait, what? God does that? Yes, this is another issue. We'll have to talk about it at another time in another series. All you have to know is dies because apparently he was making some awful, heinous, terrible choices in his life. So think about it. Here's Tamar. Tamar is married to this awful, evil, terrible dude that's making all of these choices. So imagine what her life is. It's probably going to be pretty rough. There's probably going to be a lot of pain and hurt and suffering and anxiety. So I automatically feel bad for Tamar, who was married to this awful evil dude named So dies. Then, according to the culture at that time, when one of the brothers died, the next brother, his brotherly family responsibility would then be to take the sister-in-law, the brother's wife, as his own. It was also his responsibility to take care of that wife, have children with that wife, and then those children wouldn't necessarily belong to him, that brother, but would honor the deceased older brother. And right now at this point, I'm pretty sure I just confused everybody. All you have to know is Tamar got married. Dies. The next brother of is a dude named Onan. So Onan would then marry Tamar, have children with Tamar, take care of Tamar, and then those children would be there to honor even though is dead, and Onan would then have to be responsible for this whole thing. Then it kind of gets worse for Tamar. Again, don't want to gross anyone out, but I'm telling you, anyone that thinks the Bible's boring, like you just honestly have not read it. This is pretty interesting stuff. So Onan, specifically it says, so now Onan goes, and he's basically having sex with Tamar. He's kind of doing that part of the brotherly duty, except he doesn't have children with her. He doesn't take responsibility. Onan does not take responsibility for Tamar. He doesn't protect Tamar. He just doesn't. And so Onan apparently does some things that is also evil, that God does not approve of. He makes some terrible choices, one of which being this whole idea of not taking responsibility for Tamar and protecting her and helping her in life. And so then Onan, brother, dies. So now here's Tamar, like all by herself. She's had 2 husbands and is left by herself, is still not loved or taken care of. Basically, this very first woman that Jesus chose to have in his family, her experience is one where she is not protected and she's not loved, she's not taken care of. Stay tuned, check us out tomorrow as we continue the story of Tamar, this first woman in Jesus's family tree, who God chose to be a part of that mess.